I want to tell you about the most satisfying phone call I have ever made in my entire life. I was sitting in my car, engine off, sunglasses on, and southern accent ready, and I was about to take down two people at once. My name is Maya. I'm 29 years old, and what I'm about to tell you started as a story about a woman who wouldn't stop flirting with my husband at work and ended with an entire company shutting down. I know, that sounds like a lot. Stay with me. My husband Jake has always been the kind of man who works his way up. When we met, he was driving delivery trucks for a mid sized event supply company, the kind of place that rents out tables, chairs, lighting equipment, that sort of thing. Small operation. Maybe 8 people per location, a manager, a few office staff, and a couple of drivers. Jake spent 2 years showing up early, staying late, and learning every corner of that business. Eventually, his manager promoted him to the office side: customer accounts, order processing, coordinating with vendors. He was good at it. He liked it. And then they hired Brittany. Brittany was 24. She came in as one of the new delivery drivers to cover the route Jake had vacated when he moved upstairs. From what Jake told me, she was fine at first, asked a lot of questions, which made sense, it was a new job, and Jake answered them because that was literally part of what he'd been asked to do. But the questions never stopped, and they stopped being about work pretty quickly. Here's something you should know about me. I used to bring Jake lunch 3 times a week, sometimes breakfast before my shift started. I liked doing it. I liked seeing him in his element. And I liked that his coworkers knew who I was. He kept a framed photo of us on his desk. We were his lock screen. He wore his wedding ring every single day without fail. So the first time I walked in and Brittany saw me introduce myself as Jake's wife, and I watched the smile drop off her face as her eyes went straight to his left hand, I thought, okay, she just didn't know. Now she knows. We're good. We were not good. My brother Marcus worked there too. Same office, same floor. He's the one who filled me in on most of what happened when I wasn't around. Jake's version was always just, she won't leave me alone. My brother's version had considerably more detail. According to Marcus, Brittany had been finding excuses to come upstairs since day one. A question about a delivery manifest, a problem with the loading dock app, a confusion about a client address. Every single time, she'd make a beeline for Jake's desk. Jake told her clearly, more than once, that he was happily married. Her response? Verbatim, according to Marcus, "Oh, so am I. Doesn't mean we can't be friends." She had a husband and 3 kids at home. Here's where it gets complicated. Their manager, we'll call him Craig, had a particular blind spot when it came to Brittany. She was efficient, she was punctual, she was charming with the clients, and Craig adored her for it. When Jake went to Craig and explained what was happening, Craig essentially told him to handle it professionally and not make it a big deal. When Marcus backed Jake up, Craig thanked him for his concern and changed the subject. Brittany became Craig's golden girl, which meant she was untouchable, and she knew it. The flirting escalated. Subtle things. Calculated things. A comment directed at Jake in a group conversation that she'd pause and wait for him to respond to. Lingering a little too long at his desk. Laughing a little too loudly when he said anything remotely funny. I watched some of this myself during my lunch visits, and every time I smiled, because Jake wasn't engaging. He'd answer her work questions and turn back to his screen. He'd make his responses so brief and so flat that there was nothing for her to hold on to. But she kept trying. And then came the day that broke me. I picked Jake up from work one afternoon because his car was in the shop. I got there a little early. Everyone was wrapping up, setting the alarm, heading out. We all left together. Craig first, then Marcus, then Brittany, then me, then Jake. And as Brittany walked out ahead of us, I noticed what she was wearing. Now, I want to be careful here because I genuinely don't believe in policing what women wear, in general. At the gym, at the beach, wherever. Wear what you want. But Brittany was wearing the leggings. You know the ones. The thick, waffle-textured ones that were all over social media for a while, designed to be extremely fitted, extremely sculpted, and extremely visible from every angle. At work. And she was walking slowly, deliberately, with the kind of hip movement that does not happen by accident. I looked at Jake. He was checking his phone, completely oblivious. She glanced back, caught my eye, and kept walking. And something in me went very, very quiet. The kind of quiet that means I'm thinking. The next morning, I sat in my car in the parking lot across from their office building. I had done my research. The company had a corporate HR line, a real one, listed on their website for customer inquiries and vendor concerns. I pulled up the number, I took a breath, and I summoned the most exaggerated, most polished, most concerned Southern accent I have ever produced in my life. When the receptionist answered, I asked to speak to someone about employee conduct. She transferred me. A woman picked up, professional, businesslike, asked how she could help. And I said, in my sweetest, most baffled voice, "Hi there. I'm a regular client of yours, and I just have a quick question. Do your delivery drivers have a professional dress code? Because I had one of your team members at my venue yesterday, and I have to be honest with you, honey, I was not prepared for what I saw." She immediately said, yes, of course, they had a dress code. Well, I don't think everyone got that memo because this young woman showed up in those leggings, the waffle ones, the ones that are supposed to make everything very visible. I have staff at my venue. I have other clients. I don't want that to be what people associate with my events. The pause on the other end of the line was magnificent. And then I heard it, a sharp intake of breath from somewhere in the background. The call was on speaker. There was someone else in the room. The HR woman stumbled through an apology and assured me it would be addressed immediately. She asked if I knew the employee's name. I described Brittany carefully, hair, approximate age, the route, and then pretended to struggle with the name. I think it was Brianna or Brittany, something like that. Was it Brittany? Oh, yes, that's it, Brittany. I just didn't want to say the wrong name. I thanked her profusely, said I hoped it wouldn't be an issue going forward, and hung up. I then drove to the office for Jake's lunch. I walked in 8 minutes later. Brittany was in Craig's office with the door half open, and I could hear the tail end of what was clearly a very uncomfortable conversation about company dress code policy. I set Jake's lunch on his desk, smiled at Marcus, and said absolutely nothing. She never flirted with my husband again. Here's the thing about Brittany. She wasn't just a problem for me, she was a problem for everyone. As the months went on and I became more of a fixture around that office, because Jake and I were saving money and I was between contracts, I started hearing things about Craig, about how he ran that branch, about the things he got away with because nobody felt safe enough to say anything. He made staff work through their breaks without pay during busy seasons. He told employees to mark deliveries as completed before they'd actually been made to hit his monthly targets. He screamed at people over the phone, once, memorably, at a woman who'd called in because her child was sick. He covered for Brittany every single time a complaint came in about her, not just from Jake, but from others too. And crucially, he was sloppy about it. He put things in writing, texts, emails, instructions that should never have been documented. The staff kept receipts because they had to. Jake had been looking for another job for months. So had Marcus. So had 4 other people in that office. But they all stayed because the job market was slow and because Craig had a way of making people feel like they were replaceable, like leaving would somehow reflect badly on them. Then Craig made an announcement. The company was expanding their event season. They needed everyone to commit to working through the summer. Longer hours, different schedules, mandatory weekends. He went around the room and asked each person individually if they were in. Everyone said yes. He never put it in writing. He never had anyone sign anything. He just assumed that because he'd asked and because everyone was too afraid to say no, the commitment was locked in. It wasn't. A few weeks later, over dinner at our place, I brought something up. I knew someone, a friend from my previous job, whose sister worked in labor relations. Not a lawyer exactly, more of an advocate, someone who dealt with exactly the kind of workplace violations Craig had been committing for years. I asked Jake and Marcus if they wanted to make some calls. They did. The plan was simple. elegant, deeply satisfying. For the next few weeks, everyone kept their heads down. They came in, they did their work, they smiled at Craig's announcements about the summer expansion and how great it was going to be. Meanwhile, quietly, they gathered everything. Screenshots of Craig's texts asking staff to falsify delivery records, emails confirming unpaid overtime, a voice memo from a meeting where he'd explicitly told a team member not to file a formal complaint or it would affect how he viewed their performance. They handed all of it to my contact. And then, on the last Friday before the summer schedule was supposed to begin, the day Craig had planned a little celebration for his team and their commitment to the company, every single one of them quit. No notice, no explanation beyond what the law required. They packed their things, said goodbye to each other, and walked out while Craig was still setting up the drinks in the conference room. He called, repeatedly. Nobody answered. Craig managed to pull together a skeleton crew for the first week of the summer season. It wasn't enough. Events were late, deliveries were incomplete, clients started calling the corporate line, the same line I had called months earlier, to complain. And then the labor advocate showed up. Not dramatically, not with fanfare, just a woman with a clipboard and a very thick folder of documented violations asking to speak with the branch manager. The investigation took about 6 weeks. By the time it was done, Craig had been terminated, the branch had been placed on a performance review that effectively froze all new contracts. Two corporate executives were flagged for having been aware of certain practices and doing nothing. And Brittany? Brittany had already left. Apparently, her husband found out. Not about Jake, there was never anything to find there, but about other things. Other coworkers, other situations that had nothing to do with my husband and everything to do with who she actually was. They separated. People ask me sometimes if the phone call was too much, if pretending to be a client to report a dress code violation was crossing a line. And here's what I tell them. I didn't do it because I was threatened by Brittany. I did it because my husband had reported the situation through proper channels and been ignored. Because his manager had chosen to protect someone who was making his workplace uncomfortable rather than address the problem. Because the system that was supposed to handle it had failed. So I found a different system. And as for the rest of it, the documentation, the walkout, the investigation, that wasn't my revenge. That was 11 people deciding at the same time that they had enough. I just happened to know someone who could help. So tell me, was the phone call too petty? Should I have just let it go? Or would you have done exactly the same thing? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. And if you've ever worked somewhere that made you feel like speaking up wasn't worth it, I hope this story reminds you that sometimes it very much is. Subscribe, because the stories I have coming next make this one look calm.